Yo, a new report was just released literally 24 hours ago predicting that $1.5 million Bitcoin is coming in 2030. Now, what's really interesting about this prediction is that this Bitcoin OG has been predicting a six-figure Bitcoin price for a long time now. But more recently, she is doubling down on her most bullish case for Bitcoin by the year 2030. What's changed since she began making Bitcoin price predictions over a decade ago? What else is buried in this 148 page mega report? We're going to find out. But before we jump into it, I want to bring up my legendary co-host who is always optimistic, the one and only Optimus Fields. Let's jump straight into the report and let's get into what Mrs. Cathie Woods is talking about. So let's check it out. So the name of the report is Ark's Big Ideas 2025. We've been talking about Cathie Woods' predictions for a long time now. She has an ETF. The ETF has a tremendous amount of attention. She's been extremely successful. She's made a lot of good predictions in regards to Tesla, in regards to Bitcoin. So this is obviously someone who's very serious, very well respected. This isn't just some random person. So the report goes on to say, Bitcoin, a maturing global monetary system with sound network fundamentals and growing institutional adoption. Bitcoin hit all-time high in 2024, and it goes through all the various events that happened. But what's really interesting to me here is the catalyst. So it seems like the catalyst was the election of Donald J. Trump for president. It kind of makes sense, right? Is the end of the so-called Operation Choke Point 2.0 era. And, Pennsylvania's first U.S. state to propose Bitcoin strategic reserve. Now it's a bunch of other states. And of course, David Sachs appointed U.S. AI and crypto czar. We're actually going to be playing you guys a video of the David Sachs press conference from yesterday, where he verbally confirmed that the United States of America is seriously considering a U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve. So you guys are going to have to stay tuned until we play that video for you guys. But let's continue looking at this report. So the spot Bitcoin ETF complex was the most successful ETF launch in history. There's absolutely no surprise there whatsoever. Bitcoin is the best asset the world has ever seen. Upon its fourth halving, Bitcoin's inflation rate dropped below gold's long-term supply growth. It goes on to say Bitcoin's annual volatility fell to an all-time low, while its risk-adjusted returns remained superior to most major asset classes. Now, it goes on to say, despite a steep decline in miner revenue after the halving, Bitcoin's hash rate hit an all-time high. I mean, you can make a very strong argument that the higher the hash rate, the harder it is to computationally attack the Bitcoin network, and the higher the theoretical security value proposition. You can make a very good argument for that. Transaction count soared thanks to runes. I mean, there's some things that we don't really like here at Simply Bitcoin, but I'll keep going. Bitcoin absorbed major sell pressure in 2024. We had the German government, of course, selling a massive amount of Bitcoin. An increasing number of public companies now hold Bitcoin. I mean, that's some signal right there. Of course, you have MicroStrategy, you have Marathon, you have Riot, you have Hut 8, you have Tesla. I think that's a lot of people are sleeping on that fact. The fact that Tesla holds a lot of Bitcoin. Coinbase, CleanSpark, Block, Bitcoin Group SE. It continues to say Bitcoin's aggregate cost basis hit a new high in 2024. And let's get to the page that everyone has been waiting for. Bitcoin is on pace to meet our 2030 price predictions. Now, initially when Ark Invest and Cathie Wood was dropping these price predictions, I think it was back in 2023 or 2022. And back then, she predicted her base case was $648,000 Bitcoin by 2030. Her bull case, I believe, was it was lower than 1.5. and her bear case was 250K. So all of her cases have gone up, and the base case, like the base case by 2030 is $710,000 Bitcoin. That's up from the $648,000 Bitcoin that she predicted in the previous report. Now the bull case, which is quite interesting, is $1.5 million Bitcoin by the year 2030. And of course, we're looking at the CAGR numbers. Now, the CAGR numbers is what is the annual return if you average it out between now and 2030. So the base case is a 40% CAGR. I think that's pretty conservative, considering Bitcoin's history, where it's like 250% or 300% CAGR. And the bull case is a 58% CAGR by the year 2030. And of course, all this depends on institutional investment, the Bitcoin replacing gold, emerging market safe haven, national state treasury, which I think there's a very high probability this year, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll play you guys a clip by David Sachs during the numbers segment of the show. But there's a very high probability that the strategic Bitcoin reserve is happening this year, which I think would absolutely send the price to crazy, crazy, crazy levels and new heights. I think the world has, I think that none of us are. But anyways, before I continue, Opti, what is your take on this, man? I mean, is this bullish? Is this bearish? What's your take?
Well, first of all, when I was kind of reading over this report this morning, I was kind of joking and trolling on the fact that I absolutely love seeing these institutional, managers make these really nice reports with a lot of really fancy charts. It makes all of our price predictions just sound so much better. It's got a lot more cojones to it. It's like it's not just us pulling data out of our behinds here. It's like, look at all the data, add it all together, aggregate all of the different positive things happening in Bitcoin. And this is why we can get to this prediction of, Bitcoin's going to hit 1.5 million on the bull case by 2030, 700,000 by 2030. So I obviously love these predictions. I was actually telling Nico this morning, I was on the phone with one of my friends, and he's kind of loosely a Bitcoiner, and I was telling him kind of something similar. I wish I had this report to kind of just send it to him, but he obviously wasn't going to read it. But I was explaining to him that I think in the next 10 years or so, we're going to see something on the lines of what Cathie Woods is saying with these price predictions. I was telling him, like, even if we don't really hit 2030, like if Bitcoin plays out like this cycle, 2017 cycle, that means what everyone's saying, it's like $2 million per Bitcoin. And he's like, dude, you're crazy. Like that's way too insane. Like, what's that from here? What's that means the Bitcoin market cap's going to be? And I'm like, yeah, maybe it's not going to happen this year, but by 2030, I think or rather 10 years, whether it's where are we at, 5 years or 10 years from now, I think it's very safe to assume, and a very conservative assumption to speculate, that Bitcoin is going to be in the seven figures. Obviously, we don't know when it's going to happen. We obviously know that it will happen. As a lot of Bitcoiners have been saying forever, we all thought that Bitcoin was going to get six figures last cycle. It got cut short. So we don't really know the when, but we know the how much. We know how much it's going to be. It's going up forever. A hard cap asset or hard cap currency with all of the crazy things going on in the world. And if you lay out everything going on in the world, it just makes perfect sense that the world's going digital. We're seeing analog assets or analog currencies start to transition to the digital world, just like we saw all of the analog technologies get transformed and transition into the digital world. So I don't think this is too far-fetched, but I do love to see Cathie Wood kind of double down on her predictions and be like, actually, guys, our 2025 outlook is we're on pace to hit our 2030 targets. I like some bull sauce in the morning. But Nico, I think it's very interesting. Could you zoom in on the side of that, those those side numbers there. Not the prediction, but yeah. So go over there. Those numbers are pretty interesting when you kind of break everything down. And even these seem very conservative. Nation state treasury, total assets under management, a bull case is 7%. Like I think we can hit that pretty soon. Digital gold market cap 60% by 2030. Like, I'm kind of agreeing with stuff. Institutional investments. We're hearing like the Ray Dalios of the world essentially say that, yeah, you want to have at least 2%. Remember, BlackRock's been shifting how much percentage of your portfolio should be in Bitcoin. It's kind of inching up. So 6.5% of institutional capital going into Bitcoin. I think that's kind of low. These numbers aren't that crazy when you really consider what's going on and everything playing out. And I think as we start to really see what's happening in the traditional financial world, like these numbers are going to go up. So maybe even her bull case is conservative here. I don't know. I'm obviously bull-tarded AF, and I'm always like Bitcoin's going to the moon. I mean, it's taking over the world. But these are conservative numbers when you really break it down.
For sure. And I don't think she can be completely bull-tarded like us in the community, right? She has an ETF, she has TradFi, she has a respective TradFi. So she can't go full, Bitcoin, full Bitcoin Twitter and just go bananas, right? So yeah, I mean, just a couple notes on that. And what I'll say too is, let us know what you guys think. If you guys think the base case is more viable, the base case is
no. Let me do this, Nico. Drop a 1 in the chat if you think 1.5 million by 2030. Drop a 2 in the chat if you are bearish on that scenario playing out.
There we go. So drop a 1 for 1.5 million if you think that's going to happen by 2030, and drop a 2 if you think that is absolutely insane and you guys disagree. Also, guys, smash the like button. Help us break 100 likes within the first 15 minutes of the show. We're almost there. So smash the like button, and appreciate the Rumble audience, the X audience, and of course, the YouTube audience as well. You guys are listening to Simply Bitcoin Live. Now, I saw this very, very interesting thread this morning. Let me show it off to you guys. It's by Stack Hodler. And it's important, guys, to remember perspective. And it's important to remember where you kind of are in the movie. I've told you guys many, many times, I think 2021 was a huge letdown for the Bitcoin community because of the China mining ban. We had this like weird, strange double top. We didn't have a really explosive blow off top like usually happens in Bitcoin's history. And I've been making the case that we don't remember what that feels like in Bitcoin land. I remember having a conversation with Samson Mao over the weekend, and he was basically saying like, look, like, I don't believe in diminishing returns. I totally see we can do a 10x. I don't see why that's impossible. Bitcoin is better money. That's what you have to understand. And if the United States comes through with the strategic Bitcoin reserve, I'm telling you with so much confidence, I really believe we'll see 500K Bitcoin this year if that happens. And if it doesn't happen, I still think Bitcoin is going to do amazing regardless. Samson Mao is predicting $1 million Bitcoin this year, which again, if you look at Bitcoin's history, a 10x in a year isn't that crazy. Now, I know it's a larger market cap. There's the whole theory of diminishing returns. Like, you can make a lot of solid arguments why a 10x this year is completely out of the question, but you could dream, right? Anyhow, here's Stack Hodler, and he says, it's early 2017. You're up massively after loading up on Bitcoin in the 200s in 2015. But now Bitcoin is crashing after setting new highs above the 2013 high. Is the bull market over? Should you sell now? Take profits rather than risking another brutal bear market? See next tweet for answer. And this is so important. You have to understand, guys, like when you're in the thick of things, when you're seeing things channeling at 97K, 105K, and then it goes down to 92, and you're seeing your net worth just like, move around, that's emotionally taxing. It's like, dude, like, this is crazy. But if you look at 2017, right? it kind of just, like it didn't really do much. Like in January, percentage terms, like it didn't really move, right? So, but what happened at the end of January? As you can see, this thing shot up to 20K. And this is what January looked like. So you see all this volatility. This is what January looked like back then. This is what that moment in history looked like if you consider the end of the year. So I think there's, a very high probability that Bitcoin, continues to follow its previous cycles. I think we're going to have an explosive after the halving year, which is from a historical context, that's when Bitcoin tends to be the most parabolic and the most volatile. I think that's going to continue to happen. And if you look at history, January was very, very quiet in 2017. I think we literally channeled in the 1K region for a very, very long time. And as you could see, the year ended up explosively, but not after many, many months of it kind of just channeling, of it going sideways, of it being boring. So it's important to remember that in Bitcoin, there's many, many months, even years, where nothing happens. And then there's a month or two where everything happens, right? And that's where all the throw comes, and that's where all the number go up comes and all that stuff. So I was around for 2017. Opti was around. I'm sure you remember these days, bro. It was like we could never have imagined 20K Bitcoin by the end of the year. So if we apply that to now, like you could never have imagined 500K or 250K Bitcoin by the end of the year. It's unimaginable from where we're standing, where we're at right now in February of 2025. We could not imagine that. It's unbelievable. But November of 2024, we were at 60K. If I told you we were going to hit 100K by the end of the year, which I think we actually predicted last year, you wouldn't have believed me. You would have said you are crazy, right? But it hit 100K. So, I mean, look, I'm very, very bullish for this year. I think everyone's going to be surprised, but it shouldn't change your strategy. And that strategy is stay humble, stack sats. Bitcoin is the best asset the world has ever seen, and its number is guaranteed to go up forever. 21 million divided by infinity. Anyways, guys, I do want to give a very special shout out to our lead sponsor, bitcoinwell.com. Bitcoinwell.com is the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack. Enable your independence today with Bitcoin Well. What makes Bitcoin Well different is that it's a completely non-custodial platform. What does that mean? That means that as soon as you buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well and the funds clear, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address. They don't even give you the ability to leave your funds on the exchange. And this perfectly aligns with the Simply Bitcoin ethos, because after all, self-custody is the revolution. If you're a higher net worth individual and you're looking to try to buy $50,000 worth of Bitcoin or more, check out their newly released Bitcoin Well Infinite product. It's an OTC desk for higher net worth individuals that are tired of dealing with terrible UI, or they're tired of dealing with support emails that take years or weeks to get back to you. You actually want a real human being of which you can call or text every time you want to buy Bitcoin. Check out Bitcoin Well Infinite. To get started, go to bitcoinwell.com/OTC. And if you're an American, you can now get paid in Bitcoin sent directly to their personal Bitcoin wallet. Share your Bitcoin Well direct deposit details with your employer, set your Bitcoin/dollar split, and receive sats instead of fiat with every paycheck. Guys, check out bitcoinwell.com today. Support self-custody by default Bitcoin on-ramps. Scan the QR code or check the link in the video description. All right, everybody, we have a ton to talk about today. David Sachs' historical press conference. And of course, it seems like we are ending Operation Choke Point 2.0 is completely collapsing. It's over. The SEC is scaling back enforcement. It's all coming to an end. And also DOGE, and I'm not talking about the cryptocurrency, but the Department of Government Efficiency is uncovering many, many, many things. And I think has us asking some very interesting questions. All right, everybody, let's get on to the numbers. We have tons to talk about. We'll be right back. I want to tell you guys about our sponsor, Stamp Seed. Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Are your seed words really secure? Stamp Seed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you'll need to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of writing them down on paper. Don't do that. Paper sucks. You want to literally stamp your seed into this plate of titanium. Your words are actually stamped into the metal plate with this hammer. So once your words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and your pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamp seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They are also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and most importantly, because this is generational wealth, time-proof. All things that paper is not, allowing you to hodl your Bitcoin for the long haul. I mean, here is the plate that they crushed. They put in water, they put a blowtorch to it, and as you can see, the words have survived. Stamp your seed on Stamp Seed. And you can use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on their store. All right, everybody, check out stampseed.com. Use the promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on their website. Don't write down your seed words on paper. Stamp it into titanium. Promo code SIMPLY. 15% off stampseed.com. At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is 97,630. Block height, 882,429. Sats per dollar, 1,024. Market cap, 1.93 trillion. Bitcoin versus gold market cap, 9.6%. Percentage issued, 94.38%. Decline from all-time high, negative 10.6%. Realized monetary inflation, 1.02%. In the grand scheme of things, we're just getting started, and Bitcoin is continuing to take fiat currencies to absolute school. All right, guys, this is massive, massive news. I can't emphasize that enough. The so-called crypto czar David Sachs held the difference as it relates to digital assets. Here's the Forbes article, gives a little bit of context. Yesterday, David Sachs, President Trump's crypto and AI czar, held a press conference alongside Senator Tim Scott, Representative French Hill, Senator John Boozman, and Representative G.T. Thompson to unveil new plans for U.S. leadership in digital assets. They introduced the Genius Act, a bill aimed at regulating stablecoins by establishing clear issuance procedures and designating federal and state regulators based on the issuer's size. Sachs emphasized that keeping innovation onshore is a top priority to ensure the U.S. maintains global leadership in financial technology. To advance this initiative, he announced a joint working group between the House and Senate dedicated to crypto legislation. This effort reflects the administration's broader goal of creating regulatory clarity and fostering a thriving blockchain ecosystem within the United States. Despite these announcements, the market responded negatively. With Bitcoin's price declining, some investors were frustrated by the lack of exclusive market-moving news, failing to recognize the comprehensive legislation is necessary for crypto adoption at the national level, especially if the government intends to hold digital assets as part of its Treasury Reserve. Now, here is Cynthia Lummis, I think, addressing just this, because I think a lot of people were expecting a so-called strategic Bitcoin reserve. I think a lot of people were excited for that. I think a lot of people were, expecting that. After all, that is what Trump promised at the Nashville Bitcoin 2024 conference. But what I got to tell everybody is it's important to remember this is politics. And politics is ugly, politics is full of compromises, and politics is a slow process. But I do believe that if I told you that the United States was considering a strategic Bitcoin reserve 2 years ago or 3 years ago, you would not have believed me. If I told you that it was going to be the end of Operation Choke Point 2.0, you would not have believed me. The fact that the US is even considering a US strategic Bitcoin reserve, look at how much has changed within a year. So it's important to have perspective. And if we truly believe that that Bitcoin is the best asset the world has ever seen, I think all roads lead to Bitcoin. I think it's an inevitability that this happens. Now, I think that's very positive from a number go up perspective, but from a revolutionary perspective, self-custody is the revolution. It's a totally different discussion. So there's Bitcoin as the investment, and then there's Bitcoin as the revolutionary technology of enabling individuals to reclaim back their financial sovereignty by taking Bitcoin into self-custody. So I'm going to read this X post by Senator Cynthia Lummis. She says, a lot to do. If you're frustrated that the thing you were hoping for isn't done yet, we are 15 days into a new and utterly transformative administration. Keep the pressure on, but don't get discouraged. And I think that's the last part. Keep the pressure on, but don't get discouraged. So how do you keep the pressure on? Call your representatives. If you are on X, make your voice known and heard. One of the things that we coined here at Simply Bitcoin is this is narrative trench warfare on the battlegrounds of the internet. And the way that you win narrative trench warfare on the battlegrounds of the internet is memes, it's posts, it's making videos. That's how you win, right? It's all about the narrative. It's all about really putting pressure on. Remember what happened when Trump didn't free Ross on the day of his inauguration. There was a letter written to his administration by Rand Paul, and of course, like what was happening, right? There was so much noise being on Bitcoin Twitter. Everyone was tagging Trump and saying, hey, look, we got you into office. You promised us that you were going to free Ross. What's going on here, bro? So it's important to remember that. Let's keep the pressure on. Let's keep making the noise. Here's David Bailey, CEO of BTC Inc., Bitcoin Magazine, the Bitcoin Conference. He says, market completely misreading today's press conference. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve is happening. It's a top priority direct from President Trump. They're assembling the top officials in the country to formulate a plan in next 80 days. Half the working group is Bitcoiners. The Strategic Bitcoin Reserve is happening. Now, here's a video of David Sachs in the beginning of the conference. Let's check it out.
All right, last question, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Jennifer Schwanberger with Yahoo Finance. On the campaign trail, the president said he supported the Bitcoin Reserve. I'm curious what the plans are for that at this point, and would the Biden administration consider putting crypto into a sovereign wealth fund?
So one of the things that the president instructed us to do was to evaluate the idea for a Bitcoin reserve, and so that is one of the things. That's one of the first things we're going to look at as part of the internal working group in the administration. So as soon as we get all that set up, we're still waiting for some cabinet secretaries who are on the working group to get confirmed. So we're still in the very early stages of this, but that's one of the first things we're going to look at is the feasibility of a Bitcoin reserve. I think the concept of the sovereign wealth fund is a little separate, and you'd have to talk to Secretary Lutnick, or soon to be Secretary Lutnick.
So that's something to keep in mind. Here's another clip of him being interviewed outside of the White House.
David, recast for us.
Oh, sorry about that.
David, recast for us, if you will, the value of Bitcoin specifically, cryptocurrency and blockchain technology in general. As we're now in the Trump administration era, we're in the back half of the 2020s. Back 5 years ago plus, there was talks about using it as a means of buying things. Now it's more about the store of value and the way perhaps hedge against inflation in various currencies. What do you see as the real value and the reason why the United States government should be paying so much attention to it?
Well, I think there's a few different aspects here when you're talking about digital aspects. So first of all, you got Bitcoin. It was the first digital currency, and it's the original. It's the strongest one. In the parlance of the industry, it's the most Lindy, meaning it's been around for over a dozen years now. No one's ever hacked it. No one's ever cracked the security around it. And so it is an excellent store of value. So that would be point number one. Bitcoin is run on, as you know, a blockchain. It's basically a distributed ledger, which is essentially a form of decentralized computing. And that platform can be used to create a lot of other types of products. And so that would be sort of technology area number two, is all the innovation that can be built on top of blockchains. And then I would say a third area that's very interesting is stablecoins. And this is an area that has already taken off, but mostly offshore. We want to bring that innovation onshore. We want to enable legislation to allow the issuance of stablecoins in the United States. And I think the power of stablecoins is that it could extend the dollar's dominance internationally, extend it online, digitally, and create potentially trillions of dollars of new demand for our U.S. treasuries, which could help support our debt and bring down long-term interest rates. So I think these are all three very.
So, I mean, Opti, what's your take on this? I think we were all expecting things to happen a lot sooner than anticipated. I think we were expecting a executive order, essentially ushering in the strategic Bitcoin reserve from day one. He did make some pretty big promises in Nashville, and it seems like that has fallen by the wayside. I think even Senator Lummis is understanding that, and she's reading the frustrations that people are having, because I think all of us were expecting to get our bags pumped. That was part of the deal, right? That was part of the deal. And obviously, the moment the United States makes an announcement basically calling for a strategic Bitcoin reserve, I think Bitcoin's going to move up very, very quickly. I think that's the stamp of approval by one of the most powerful governments on the face of the planet. So, yeah, Opti, what's your take on this, bro? I mean, are you let down? Are you disappointed? How are you feeling about all this?
Well, I'm highly disappointed. I was promised 150K day one. I don't know what all this price pumping is that's supposedly going to happen. It didn't happen. No, I'm trolling. What I'm talking about is Trump was saying he wants to see 150K Bitcoin early in his, I think it was 100 days or early in his presidency. So, I mean, look, I was kind of saying this when the executive order was dropped, that I wasn't sure what day one was actually. Was it inauguration day? Was it the following day? And I mean, depending on the semantics here, he did kind of follow through with that executive order, at least talking about, I know it was a digital asset stockpile, which is, fingernails on a chalkboard to me. But on the Senator Lummis point, I think I might kind of disagree with her a little bit. Like, yes, obviously, and this is not just me being a Bitcoiner. Like, yes, obviously, I want to see this stuff pick up and happen very quickly, because someone in the chat said, like, what do they got to study? All they got to do is buy some Bitcoin and put it on a passport. Like, that's all they got to do. But the pushback that I would kind of say to the Senator Lummis stuff is like, yes, I know we're only 2 weeks into this administration, and I think they're doing a lot of stuff, and they're moving very quickly on a lot of things outside of just the Bitcoin space. But we also got to remember, like, midterms are in 2 years, and so realistically, we probably only have about a year to get this stuff in. And I know they're saying it was 90 days. And so I will give them some time and some leeway to actually look through this and make the right decision. But in reality, we don't really have that much time to push through this Bitcoin strategic reserve, because, we basically have a year, because next year they're going to go in full overdrive for the 2027 midterms. And then all of the, they're not going to do any crazy. Is it 2026?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So whatever. We have 2 years basically until the midterms. And so that means that we basically have a year, because next year they're just going to kind of pull things back. They can't be doing anything too outlandish because they're trying to secure some more seats in the House. So, realistically, we don't have that much time right now, but I do kind of give them some leeway. Yes, of course, governments move slower than an individual would or institutional capital. Remember how long it took the institutional additional capital to get in Bitcoin. Remember how long it took to get the ETF approved. So like it doesn't move as quickly as an individual would or a small business would, even though there is a lot of venture capitalists now in the federal government, and a lot of them are holding Bitcoin. I am optimistic about, or cautiously optimistic about, essentially it being a Bitcoin reserve, because like you don't want your reserves to be in some speculative altcoin here. And now that we also have that sovereign wealth fund drop yesterday, it looks very interesting. It looks, no matter what mechanism is, they will be holding Bitcoin in some form or fashion. And so that is going to legitimize Bitcoin. Obviously, I'm here for the revolution. I want you, the individual out there, to be holding Bitcoin. But whatever it takes for Bitcoin to be legitimized in your mind, hey, I'm not here to nitpick. It doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to be done. So whatever it is for Bitcoin to be legitimized in your minds, then I'll take it. Just make sure that you're buying Bitcoin, not leaving it on an exchange. You're taking it into custody, and all of this stuff will work itself out eventually. And what really matters is the adoption of Bitcoin. Now, there is one more point in this, but I'm gonna leave that for the culture, and it's that whole stable coin comment at the end. But I'm gonna talk about that in the culture. So that's kind of my take on, are we being kind of high tide preference here? Are we being entitled babies here because it's not happening quick enough? I kind of would say yes, but also we really don't have that much time. Just this is how the mechanism of politics works out. And so, I love Cynthia Lummis, and I think she is right. There's no benefit of us freaking out here, but there is kind of a time limit.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. I think we have 2 years before the Trump administration. We have 2 years. I mean, look, so for anyone who doesn't understand American politics, what tends to happen historically is that the incumbent party loses the House or the Senate. So there's a high probability that the Democrats will essentially, it won't be a trifecta government now that Trump has, where he can essentially just get through legislation extremely quickly. He got a mandate from the American people. He won the popular vote, electoral landslide. You can make an argument for that. And of course, he won the House, he won the Senate. Now, does this mean that there aren't some Democrats that are going to be pro Bitcoin? I was talking to Senator Cynthia Lummis in D.C., and there are senators like Senator Gillibrand and Ro Khanna. So it's not monolithic. It's not black and white. But the party as a whole, if it's still controlled by the Elizabeth Warren camp, doesn't exactly feel very pretty, or it doesn't feel very kindly towards the industry. If you take a look at one of the things that they tried to pass in the House was the Republicans introduced a bill that would essentially ban the federal government from rolling out a central bank digital currency. And unfortunately, that bill went across party lines, right? So most of the Republicans essentially voted for the bill, which would make it illegal for the federal government to roll out a CBDC, and most of the Democrats voted against the bill that would ban the federal government from rolling out a central bank digital currency. So yeah, I think there's 2 years for them to roll it out. But I do agree with Senator Lummis. It's only been 15 days. So far, Ross is freed. So I think there is progress being made. But I think that doesn't take away we should keep up the pressure, is what I'm trying to say. We should not, take our foot off the gas pedal. I think this would be extremely positive from a price perspective. I think from a revolutionary perspective, we got to keep pushing self-custody. Self-custody is a revolution. You want individuals all around the world buying Bitcoin and putting that Bitcoin into self-custody. Anyways, guys, before we move on to the next segment, I do want to talk to you about what we're going to talk about. So essentially, there's a lot of news coming out of DOGE. And I'm not talking about the cryptocurrency. I'm talking about the Department of Government Efficiency, which was something that Elon Musk was going to essentially run and take care of. And essentially, it has discovered some very interesting things in terms of where a lot of this funding was going to. And what's really interesting to me as well is the amount of pushback that it has gotten and the arguments that are being used essentially to try to stop Doge. So we're going to cover a lot of that today because I think it leads to a very fundamental question that we have to really ask ourselves, right? Why was all this capital misallocation, all this waste? Why is this even possible? And even if Doge does its job and cleans it up, we're just one election away from being right where we started, right? So how is all this possible? This is possible because of the money printer. If we don't address that issue, these things will repeat themselves. I can't emphasize that enough. If the government or anybody has the ability to create money out of thin air, out of nothing, and there is no type of downside from you printing money, why would you not print money? What is the downside to you as a politician for you not to print? There is no downside. There is no downside. Listen, if I make mistakes, Simply could go out of business. If the government makes mistakes, they just print money. There is no market feedback that's essentially telling them, you're not really doing well. The only market feedback, technically, the only feedback they receive is an election. And the way that I'm seeing elections as a Bitcoiner is it's essentially like a popularity contest to see who controls the money printer. That's how I see it. That's really how I see it. So I think this Doge thing is a step in the right direction, and it's definitely uncovered a lot of abuses and fraud, but I don't think it solves the fundamental issue. And I think this is where Bitcoiners are completely ahead of the curve, because we understand, listen, you can have a great government, but what Bitcoiners are making the argument for is that nobody should have the ability to create money for free that another man has to work for. That is a tremendous amount of power that governments have fundamentally abused. And I think it's important for everyone to remember is that that wasn't the original social contract. The original social contract was that money was backed by gold. That was the original social contract. This fiat experiment, which I think has been disastrous for society. Like, take a look at what the F happened in 1971. It's only been around since 1971. It has not been around longer than that. This idea that governments could just print out of thin air is a pretty relatively new idea, and it's completely destroyed my generation's ability to buy a home and save for the future. That is what Bitcoin is about. So even if, governmentally with this Doge thing with Elon, even if we're heading in the right direction, it's important not to lose vision on what the end goal should be. And the end goal should be ending the Federal Reserve, ending the central bank. You can make a very strong case that it is the root of all evil. It is the root of all this fraud. It is the root of the inability for the younger generations to save into the future. It is the root cause as to why the younger generations are poorer than our parents. So we have to address that issue. I think the Overton window is shifting there. I think when Trump talks about the idea of ending the federal income tax, we're moving that Overton window closer and closer to until when the mainstream political discussion starts to become something like, we need to end the Fed. We need to end the Fed. We need to end the central bank. And there's nothing to replace it to. You don't replace something. It was just a bad idea. It came with the best intentions, but it's been horrific. The worst depressions and recessions in American history have happened under the Federal Reserve. The worst world wars in American history have happened under the Federal Reserve. It failed. It was a failed experiment. It is a failed experiment. But I think the reason that you don't hear politicians talk about it so much is because it's their source of revenue. And I'm not talking about income tax. I'm talking about taxation via inflation. All right, everybody, let's get to the news. We have tons to talk about. We'll be right back.
I want to give a very special shout out to our sponsor, Compass Mining. They make Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone, from beginners to experienced investors. Their turnkey miners gets you online and hashing within 48 hours, making it easier than ever to start your mining journey. Plus, with their active marketplace, you can resell your miner at any time, adding flexibility and value to your investment. Visit their website to access a wealth of resources, learning everything you need to know about Bitcoin mining. Take your first step into the world of Bitcoin mining with confidence. Discover more at compassmining.io. Again, compassmining.io, and see how Compass Mining can power your success. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Foundation. It's self-custody done right. They built a premium grade hardware wallet called Passport right here in the US, and it integrates seamlessly with their free app called Envoy. Passport is fully open source and verifiable. It's the most intuitive Bitcoin wallet designed with a UX reminiscent of a classic feature phone, so you'll know how to navigate it and use it the moment you pick it up. It's also air-gapped, meaning Bitcoin stays offline, never touching an internet connection. It's Bitcoin only, open source verifiable, air-gap security model, gorgeous design craft, premium grade materials. Get your Bitcoin off exchanges and into your own hands in just a few minutes with Passport at foundation.xyz/simply. Get peace of mind.
All right, everybody, here's Opti, and Opti's about to show you the Passport by Foundation devices, not your keys, not your cheese. You want to take self-custody of your Bitcoin, scan the QR code on your screen right now, take you directly to the Passport by Foundation devices website, where you guys can get yourself a Passport. Use promo code SIMPLY to get yourself a discount. Remember, guys, not your keys, not your cheese. All right, everybody, let's get into today's news. So the argument that I've been seeing against Doge doesn't make sense. So the argument is essentially that Elon and Doge can't audit the government, which you supposedly pay for, but they can audit you or you go to jail. That doesn't make sense. It's supposed to be a government by the people for the people. The government works for you. Your taxpayers, your tax dollars fund the government. The idea that you can't audit the government, but if the government can't audit you, you go to jail. But that's tyranny. That's not how that works. This is not a dictatorship. This is supposed to be a representative democracy. That the government works for you. So this whole idea is completely Frankenstein. And I'll give you another example too. So remember when they tried to pass a law that every $600 transaction had to be reported? Now the same people are saying that Elon shouldn't be able to audit anything government related. Now my question is, what do they have to hide? What do they have to hide? Why are they so against, why are they so against these audits? What are they hiding? Why the double standards? So we're not going to get into anything that's not related to the show that we have. And one of the things that we always talk about on Simply is the idea of the separation of money and state, but also the idea of the separation of information and state. Now, what a lot of people were not anticipating or were not aware of is, did you guys know that a lot of your tax dollars, if you live in the United States, are actively funding media organizations? I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? A lot of why were they attacking Bitcoin? Like, why did they feel certain ways about certain things? Well, that's because they were literally getting paid by the government. Check out one of the things that DOGE uncovered. DOGE uncovered that 37 FDA employees got political pro, and essentially $500,000. That's how much those subscriptions were costing us. I mean, like, think about it from a taxpayer's perspective. The average salary in the United States is like 60, 70K. What are you paying in taxes out of that? Let's say 10, 15K. Like, could you imagine how many people would have to pay taxes just to pay for these Politico subscriptions? Like, it's absurd. But of course, it's not only that. Not just Politico, the Associated Press. Remember the same Associated Press that essentially like talks so much poo-poo on Nayib Bukele, on El Salvador's Bitcoin law, right? And we know how the previous administration felt about Bitcoin, right? The US government was funding the Associated Press. They gave him $619,000. I mean, this post makes perfect sense. The Associated Press's bias also makes perfect sense. I mean, so essentially we're uncovering that the US government is funding so-called independent media sources. What is the solution to this? Like, DOGE, I feel like, is a Band-Aid. The solution is the separation of money and state, because if not, this is going to keep happening. For them, $619,000 is something they can literally print out of thin air. And they're using their ability to print out of thin air to essentially fund media organizations that were hostile towards you. To put it nicely and to put it simply. Now, moving on. Do you guys remember the New York Times? Well, the New York Times, the US government, according to this repost by Elon Musk, the US government gave the New York Times tens of millions of dollars over just the past 5 years, despite paying relatively little money to the New York Times in the years preceding 2021. For instance, in August 2024, the U.S. government awarded $4.1 million to the New York Times. Why is the U.S. government giving money to legacy media institutions? It kind of makes sense why all those articles coming out of the New York Times that were so hostile towards Bitcoin, it all makes sense now. Who was paying the New York Times the entire time? Millions of dollars. It was the US government, right? So you see how I'm connecting the dots here. Now, this is just like a part of DOGE that we're talking about because we like to talk about information. Information is the front line. Free speech is the front line for the battle for Bitcoin, the separation of money and state. So we like to talk about this, but it all makes sense now. The attacks on Nayib Bukele, the attacks on Bitcoin by the New York Times, the same government that was essentially doing Operation Choke Point 2.0, that same government was also paying those media outlets which me and Opti spent so much time and effort debunking. It all makes sense. Follow the money. And it's very interesting to me as well. Why is a government funding so-called independent media? What? And then as a taxpayer, are you okay with that? Are you okay with that? Because that same media was attacking your bags, right? So yeah, I mean, this is crazy. We're only 15 days in. I think what's going to be discovered by this whole DOGE thing is going to be so eye-opening. And again, their only attacks on this is basically Elon shouldn't have that type of power to go in there and essentially audit what they're doing. That's absurd. Remember, you are paying for that. You are paying for that. You are paying the government. You're paying the government for these services. And they're basically saying, no, you can't look at what we're doing with the money you're giving us. That's tyranny. That's tyranny. That's what it is. So I haven't seen any good excuses so far. And their actions, right, in terms of them trying to cover up what is happening and then what's coming out from what is being discovered, like it makes them look really, really guilty. Do you guys remember the Senator Bob Menendez? You guys remember Bob Menendez? He said that what Nayib Bukele was doing was criminal with Bitcoin and whatever. He was discovered, and I believe he was just charged and he was convicted for taking bribes from the Egyptian government in gold bars, right? So what I'm seeing here is a classic case of projection. They're projecting onto us what it is they're guilty of themselves. I think transparency in government is key. And if you guys are so worried, you should have nothing to hide. But so far, only a week after Elon is looking in, look at all the BS we found. Look at all the BS he's found. It's absurd. The US government should not be funding independent media sources, because if they're funding independent media sources, they're no longer independent. If someone is paying you $4 million a year, what are you incentivized to do? You're incentivized to write good stories about the person who's paying you $4 million a year. This is absurd, not surprising whatsoever. Opti, what's your take on all this, man? Because I've been looking over this stuff on X for the last couple of days, bro, and it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me. It explains so many articles. It explains so much media, the way that they've been approaching it. But what's your take, man? Like, this is ridiculous. What else are they going to find? Like, what's next?
Yeah, well, just before I go into my take, that Bob Menendez story is pretty hilarious when you see Nayib Bukele basically say, like, yeah, hey, you guys can send them to me. We'll put them in our prisons. that cracked me up on Twitter. But anyways, going back to this, we've been covering this story constantly, and we kind of were doing the casual meme of if there's smoke, there's fire. Obviously, when you understand how the fiat system works, how you understand how the money printer works, you can get to these first principles and you can kind of predict the future pretty easily. And we've been calling the corporate press or state propaganda for a long time. And now we actually have the data from Elon Musk or the DOGE to show that they are literally state propaganda. And it's not even just in the US. I also saw that they sent a couple million to the BBC. So it's not even just the US that we're spending money on for the state propagandas. We're literally doing it in in Europe or the UK. It's absolutely insane. And so look, as anyone knows that watches this show, I am more skeptical of Elon Musk than, say, Nico is. I'm slightly skeptical of Elon. Obviously, I think what he's doing, though, really does remind me of what he did with Twitter. Remember when he came in with Twitter, he had the sync. He basically nuked like 80% of Twitter, and then Twitter started to run more efficiently. And I think this is what all of us Bitcoiners talk about, the separation of money and state, even though this is coming from more of like a centralized you could argue that this is more government on top of it. But what we have seen is that the federal government is super inefficient. It is, it is bogged down by bureaucracy, and there's so much red tape that has to, be overlooked or rather to be looked over. There's so much unnecessary bulk in the federal government that, having Elon come in there and essentially just gut a lot of these institutions or a lot of these divisions, I think is a very good thing. So, hey, if he does what he did with Twitter, essentially, and then, federal workers might not like this, but essentially fires like 80% of the government, I think this is a good thing. Even though I am skeptical of Musk, I'm not the biggest fan of Musk. I think there's things that I do like from him, other things I'm more skeptical of, but it is very interesting to get this data point. We've been saying this on the show for a long time, that the corporate press, this is why we call them the corporate press, is state propaganda. And now we can see, if we follow the money, where it's coming from. It is coming from the money printer or, taxpayer dollars. So either way, we are actively paying these corporate press megaliths to lie to us and continue to spread false narratives, hurt people, make people poor. And this is why we've seen in the last couple of years this attack on social media, is because they can't compete with social media with independent content creators or independent journalists on Twitter and people building their own followings. And it does seem like the legacy media system, the corporate press, is kind of, I don't want to say that they are going by the wayside, but it does seem like they are losing their control and they're freaking out about it. And this is, why we are seeing the violent pushback against Elon Musk and DOGE, etc., and people in just culture freaking out, because it is shaking things up. And like I said earlier, even though, and when we were talking about Senator Lummis, even though we're only 2 weeks in, it does seem like this administration has been in power for a lot longer than 2 weeks, and they are moving pretty quickly on a lot of stuff. Obviously, this Bitcoin stuff, it's like, they're going to give them 90 days to look into it. But in regards to kind of shaking things up, shaking up the norm, it is pretty incredible to watch them kind of really dismantle politics as we've known for a long time. It seemed like the political Leviathan was just so big that nothing would ever change. And then we get some people with some will coming in, and things seem to be changing rather quickly. So with this, I hope that more people understand that you can't trust the news stations, the big news stations, the CNBC, CNN, New York Times, etc. They're no longer just journalists. They are not here to report on the news. They are here to fabricate narratives. And I think more exposure on this topic hopefully wakes more people up, and they realize, hey, maybe everything we've ever known is a lie. Maybe we have to reevaluate what we think money is. Maybe we have to reevaluate our relationships with the federal government, with state laws, etc. And things are moving quickly. Again, maybe not quickly enough for everyone else, but hey, I love getting to this core story here where, obviously they're state propaganda machines. I think any Bitcoiner's seen this happen for a long time.
It's confirmed now,
I
dude.
know. That's what I mean. I love the confirmation.
There's no doubt. Anyways, guys, stay tuned. Shout out to the 3,000 of you guys watching live between YouTube and X, and also shout out to the Rumble audience, almost 300. I think we broke 300 live viewers on Rumble today. So guys, if you guys are enjoying the show, make sure to drop a comment in the live chat. Make sure to smash the like button, and consider subscribing if you feel like we are providing you value. We're going to hit the culture. Opti, what are we going to talk about during the culture segment today?
As I said earlier, when we were talking, this new setup is not. We're still working some kinks out over here on our new setup. When we talked about in the numbers, this press conference, they are making a big emphasis on stablecoins, and I want to talk on stablecoins. And Nico, just go to the next scene.
What is happening? All right,
our new setup's weird.
All right, they changed Restream's back end. All right, guys, we'll be right back. We're gonna hit the culture segment.
I want to give a shout out.
Oh my God.
I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, HIVE Digital Technologies. As the first ever public miner, HIVE's been battle tested through every possible market. And as the first with an AI strategy, HIVE continues to redefine the future of sustainable energy. Also, gotta casually drop this in here, HIVE consistently tops the industry in Bitcoin mined per exahash. They're lean and mean, they're green and clean, and they're changing the game. Learn more by following them at HIVE Digital Tech, or check out their website, hivedigitaltech.com.
Also, big breaking news. MicroStrategy has officially changed their name to Just Strategy. So that is
Bitcoin logo
with the Bitcoin
and their colors,
with the Bitcoin logo. So I find that interesting. Anyways, before we jump into it, guys, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, BitBlockBoom. It's going to be an amazing Bitcoin conference coming up in Dallas, Texas, April 3rd through the 6th. You guys definitely don't want to miss it. They're going to have an axe throwing contest. They're going to have a Texas barbecue, a lunch, a dinner, a casino night. You guys definitely don't want to miss it. BitBlockBoom, Dallas, Texas, April 3rd through the 6th. Get your tickets quickly. The entire Simply Bitcoin crew will be there. We hope to see you guys there as well. Scan the QR code or check the link in the video/podcast description. All right, Opti, I do think we should give everyone an update in regards to MicroStrategy changing the name because it is breaking news.
Shoot it. You can shoot it a little bit.
Let's just show the new logo. This was just unveiled. Here's, of course, the Chad Sailor. Here is strategy, and it's called Strategy B, of course, with the Bitcoin B. This is absolutely awesome. This is very cool, extremely fitting. It didn't really make sense that it was called MicroStrategy. So epic pivot by Michael Saylor. And, shout out to the incredible success story that has been MicroStrategy, which is now Strategy. Anyways, Opti, floor is yours.
Thank you. No longer MicroStrategy. Now it's just Bitcoin Strategy. Love it. Love the branding and the colors and everything. Okay, so you guys have, if you've been here, you guys know my take on stablecoin. So it's going to be a good kind of balanced take here from Nico, but I am just seeing that what the administration's doing is they're telegraphing what their moves are. And so here I'm starting with the executive order. Obviously, we all watched this and we were very excited about a Bitcoin strategic reserve. But when you go into this and in this very paper, they did talk about banning CBDCs, but they also talked about, where is it? It's here. For the purpose of this order, the term digital asset refers to any digital representation of value that is recorded on a distributed ledger, including cryptocurrencies, digital tokens, and stablecoins. So in the very executive order where they announced a, quote, digital asset stockpile, they also talked about banning CBDCs and also talked about incorporating stablecoins. And now this is where a lot of, you could say, tinfoil hat Bitcoiners have been talking about this for a long time, like Mark Goodwin, Shinobi, Magoo. A lot of Bitcoiners have been seeing what the administration is telegraphing and where things are going. And in this press release, and we actually played a little bit of it earlier as well, I think we're starting to see a trend build out right now. And so, as the reigning tinfoil hat guy here, I think it's my duty to talk about this. So here we go. David Sachs in yesterday's press conference, and he does literally lay out the plan for stablecoins and what it means. So let's play this real quick.
I want to say additionally, we're excited about working with both the House and Senate on stablecoin legislation. I know Senator Haggerty introduced a bill today. This stablecoins really have the potential to ensure American dollar dominance internationally, to increase the usage of the U.S. dollar digitally as the world's reserve currency, and in the process create potentially trillions of dollars of demand for U.S. treasuries, which could lower long-term interest rates. So let me stop there, and I want to say additionally.
Okay, so to me personally, the game is being exposed. Obviously, this is why, as a Bitcoiner, I'm not the biggest fan of stablecoins, because I'm not here for dollar dominance. I'm here for Bitcoin to take over the world. And a lot of these stablecoins they're literally telegraphing what the move is they want to ensure dollar dominance, to ensure that dollars get into places that it hasn't gotten there. And personally, as a Bitcoiner, that's not what I'm here for. I'm here for Bitcoin to take over the world. But Magoo did a great breakdown of this, and actually Jeff Park later did a great breakdown of this, and then we'll talk about this. So Magoo goes, much to take away from this 30-second clip besides the obvious US dollar dominance narrative. One, stablecoin reserves are vastly short duration treasury bills and bonds, so not sure how they will lower long-term interest rates. Two, maybe they are thinking of mandating a certain portion of stablecoin reserves be held in long-dated treasuries. Three, he just admitted that buyers of last resort in size can manipulate rates lower. Fourth, he expressed the desire for long-term interest rates to be suppressed below growth and inflation expectation as a positive. And five, stablecoin market is going into the trillion. So, if only stablecoins weren't stable and pegged to $1, maybe your stablecoin's going to $100. No, I'm trolling. But Jeff Park, head of alpha strategies at Bitwise Invest, did a great thread on this as well. And he goes, it's surprising how many people overlook the most important thing David Sachs said yesterday about stablecoins, that stablecoin demand could lower long-term interest rates. This is the real takeaway. Fiscal dominance is unstable, and stablecoins will be America's new U.S. Treasury, which sounds a lot like my boy's book, Mark Goodwin, The Bitcoin Dollar System. He's been going on the beat for a long time. We just had him on the show a little while ago. We were chatting about this. And this is kind of what we're all seeing here. So here we go. Jeff Park, he said, called it roughly 3 years ago. One way to view the stablecoin competitive landscape is through the lens of another particular war in America yet to come between one, the American middle class, and two, U.S. Treasury holders. And remember, most stablecoins are backed by treasuries, especially Tether here. Stablecoins essentially suffer the same Trifflin dilemma. To put it simply, what is good for the dollar is not necessarily good for dollar policy. And you want more trade facilitation, but you don't want foreigners to hold the exact medium of exchange. And he kind of goes on, but he goes on right here to basically run it down. The lesson remains the same. One I consistently emphasize to my audience: there's no absolute truth in economics. Nothing will prevent the manipulation of time through fiat to manufacture endless liquidity. And this is the foundation of my radical portfolio manifestation. And so, very interesting. And, maybe one last kind of meme, my boy Mark Goodwin. Everyone will buy treasuries at the duration and yield they deserve. So personally, again, I think what we're seeing right now is a very clear telegraph from the administration that, yes, they are being forced to add Bitcoin to either their strategic Bitcoin reserve or their sovereign wealth fund. But also, as we heard in yesterday's press conference, they're talking about the need for regulatory clarity. And I think with that need, we're going to get a lot clearer view on stablecoins, what's going to go in stablecoins. And personally, this does make me a little concerned because I'm not here to continue the dollar system. I am here for Bitcoin to take over. And as we know, stable coins are, you could consider them a link between the fiat system to the Bitcoin system. Now, I have a slightly different view than Nico, but what I'm seeing from the administration is I think we're going to see some form of unfeathered stablecoin administration. And, even though they are talking about banning a CBDC in the state or in the United States from the federal level, it doesn't neglect or stop the fact that we might see something similar come out from the private sector. And this is my concern: is I want something that is permissionless, censorship resistant, that is voluntary, that people use because they are able to store their value, versus something that you can get shut off on. To me, a stablecoin is just an extension of the fiat system. Now, that's not what I'm here for, but me and Nico do have different views on stablecoins, so I think this will be a balanced conversation here. So I thought it's very interesting that we heard David Sachs mention stablecoins, and not just mention stablecoins, but mention it in the framing of continuing the dominance of dollars around the world and globally. So I'm hearing it's essentially going to make the dollar even stronger globally, which it looks like we have a big battle ahead for us Bitcoiners. Anyways, Nico, what's your thoughts on this? Am I going too tinfoil here? Am I too much of a conspiracy theorist on today's show?
No, not at all. And I do want to end the poll that we ran before I get into it. So 462 of you guys voted that 462 of you guys voted. 51% of you guys think that we will hit 500K Bitcoin this year, and 48% of you guys said that you don't think Bitcoin will hit 500K this year. Anyways, going back to the conversation, it reminds me of Howard Lupnick. Howard Lupnick, again, is the chairman of Counter Fitzgerald, and on the Pomp podcast, he specifically said, he's like, you can't say Bitcoin is a currency, because then, you're stepping on the toes of the politicians. You have to say it's a commodity, like oil and like gold, and then they won't see it. Now, the thing is, and connect this with the IMF deal with El Salvador. The IMF, part of their deal was that El Salvador essentially had to walk back their legal tender law. Now, to be fair, and I did ask Samson Mao about this, and I did ask the ambassador to El Salvador in the United States in DC, Mrs. Mayorga, and essentially it's becoming voluntary. So you could still use Bitcoin. There's no capital gains implication, and they're still buying Bitcoin to put it in the country's treasury, in the country's reserves. But they lost that legal tender law, right? And then you have to think about it. Like, why is the IMF so concerned about the legal tender law? Why is Howard Lupnick saying this on Pomp's podcast about how you can't call it a currency, you can only call it a commodity? I think it scares the living daylights out of governments that there is a competing currency, that there is a competing currency that's better than their currency. I think it scares them that all of a sudden they lose their ability to print money. I think it scares them tremendously. Now, I think the big question is going to be, how is this going to play out? Is Bitcoin going to be an alternative, a backup solution? Because in developing countries, and the reason I think me and Opti have different thoughts on this, in developing countries, what you're seeing is wide adoption of Tether. And as Bitcoiners, we believed that is going to be wide adoption of Bitcoin because people are trying to flee inflation. That isn't the case. What's being adopted is Tether instead. Now, I believe that Tether is a Trojan horse. It's one stepping stone away from adopting Bitcoin. So I think you can't. This is only going to delay the inevitable. I think that this is kind of the final boss, the final battle. And I think that this is inevitable. This is an inevitability that, Jeff Booth's quote comes to mind, right? One of the things about Bitcoin that you're going to have to be okay with and get used to is that even your worst enemies are going to use Bitcoin. And that includes governments. And if a government is going to use Bitcoin in order to prop up their local fiat currency, it is what it is, right? So, obviously, ideally, in an ideal world, we would essentially want Bitcoin to be the global reserve currency. I think it will. That's the thing. I think that's inevitable because it's better money. But, this going through the death throes, essentially, them trying to figure out anything possible in order to kind of continue this ability to print money. I think they're going to try anything and everything. And if Bitcoin is superior, if it really is the better money, if Bitcoin is this inevitability that we all think it is, then they can't really stop it, right? This is just going to delay the inevitable. That's my opinion, man. So I also don't think stable coins are necessarily a bad thing, specifically in developing countries. I think it's completely changed the opportunities that Argentinians or Venezuelans or Brazilians have, because now they have the ability to save in dollars, and now they have the ability to transact in dollars. And for the vast majority of people, you have to understand that they don't have the privilege that a lot of us Bitcoiners have, the privilege of being able to save. They're living paycheck to paycheck. So for them, as a utility, they're looking at Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has volatility baked into it. If you're living paycheck to paycheck and your main concern is about putting food on the table and being able to live and flourish, you're not really thinking about saving. You're thinking about trying to survive. So that's just something to keep in mind. And I know Mark Goodwin has some really good takes on this. I know Opti feels a certain way about this, but I think it's important to if we are Bitcoiners, we believe in the free market. It's important to pay attention to what the free market is telling us, number one. And number two, it's important for us to put ourselves in other people's shoes so that we understand why the market is behaving the way it is. The vast majority of people are just trying to get by. And for the vast majority of people that are just trying to get by, volatility is not a good thing for you, right? If all of a sudden you get paid $100 and that's how you're going to feed your entire family, and because of Bitcoin's volatility on that specific month, that $100 is worth $85, that doesn't seem very attractive, does it? Right? So we all have to remember that a lot of us have the financial privilege. We have the means to be able to put a little bit of money on the side to save for the future. Most people do not have that privilege. And that's extremely important to remember. So that's my take on the whole stablecoin stuff.
It was great. I like it. No, I mean, I totally agree. I guess I'm still a paranoid person. It's inherently in me. I just, I don't trust the system as it is. And therefore I want us to keep our heads on a swivel. Obviously, I also believe Bitcoin is inevitable, but with that means that it's because we have to continue to work hard and stay vigilant. And so as much as it feels like Bitcoin's winning, there is probably some things on the horizon that are potential threats. And like you said, I think it is the final boss we have here. And really the final boss is education, like you said, Nico. And we need to continue to educate people. We need to continue to show people that there is an alternative. And right now, people really don't think that Bitcoin is that alternative until we finally either start getting into seven-figure ranges, or, more people realize that their local fiat currencies are trash, that $1 does not actually equal $1, etc. So there's still a huge, huge amount of work to be done. But this is why we show up to the game, man. This is why we do what we do. This is why Simply Bitcoin has a job for a while. So I'm hyped.
Yeah, 100%. All right, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed today's show. Tons of you guys tuned in right now on YouTube alone. 5,000, sorry, not 5,000. I wish. One day, 528 live viewers on X. We're at almost 3,000 live viewers, and Rumble, Opti, where are we at? Like roughly 280.
Rumble, 311 right
so
now.
shout out to the Rumble audience as well. Guys, if you guys enjoyed today's show, make sure to smash the like button. Consider subscribing if you feel like we provided you value. We're Simply Bitcoin Live. I'm your host, Nico. It's my legendary co-host, Optimus Fields. We love you all. And we'll be back tomorrow for a brand new episode. Take care, everybody.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.